Welcome to the Effective Executive. If you are new to this YouTube channel or the podcast, I recommend that you go to the 95method.com/executive playlist, all one word, and watch the videos. It tells you exactly what it means to be an effective executive and kind of the purpose of this whole podcast and YouTube channel. So this week I wanted to cover the customer lens. I've talked about this in my trip to Disney World and how I kind of look through the lens, but I had a scenario come up personally that I'm going through presently that I thought I'd share because I think it highlights some of the things that I've talked about both in the podcast and the YouTube channel. So basically, I'm going to walk you through two scenarios. One, because it failed, led to the other. And the first scenario was I've been diversifying my portfolio, my investments, and decided I wanted to buy some gold and silver and keep it in my IRA and store it off-site and a number of other things. So on February 1st, someone who I follow talks about gold and silver and investments and how the economy's in the process of being blown up is Peter Schiff, and he owns a company called Schiff Gold, and he also has Euro Pacific Fund. But I was interested in the Schiff Gold portion, and basically what you go through is the process of setting up your IRA. And then they take the gold and the silver and they put it into a storage area. And so Shift Gold had several actually options of companies that I could set up the IRA with. They recommended Entrust, or it was the one at the top of their list. And the person I had contacted at Shift Gold sent me some forms, and I filled them out as best I could. I wasn't sure what was supposed to be filled out, what wasn't. And I submitted the forms, and then I got a couple questions back from Shift Gold. And so I took care of those. And I told the person there that I was working with that, I'm struggling to figure out what I'm supposed to fill out or not fill out on the form. And this has been a very difficult process because there's a whole slew of things on these forms, 7 pages of forms or 11 pages of forms, 2 different applications, one for a new account, one for an IRA transfer. All these things had to be filled out. And it's not clear as the customer going through these forms what needed to be and what didn't need to be. And some of the terms that they use were difficult. They were almost like jargon for the industry. And so finally, I filled it out. I contacted my contact at Shift Gold and said, hey, I've got the funds. I think I filled everything out. I've got everything. Well, I never heard from them again. I asked them to follow up, and then they asked me to do, did you fax a form to so-and-so? And that wasn't anywhere in the instructions that I got. So I finally just said, okay, the heck with this. I give up on February 25th. Well, I still wanted to get this accomplished. So I had hoped that maybe someone would contact me and say, here's some of the things you can do from Shift Gold. It never happened. I got off onto some other things, but so it led to this second scenario, which another person that I listened to is a guy named Mike Maloney. Does some excellent things about the economy and gold and silver and things of that sort. So they're at goldsilver.com. Now they use or recommend, they also had multiple choices of IRA organizations that I could set up my IRA with for this transfer of gold and silver, to hold it and those types of things. But they recommended a company called Equity Trust. And so I filled out the application on March 19th, and they said, you'll be contacted in a few days about your application if there's any questions, those types of things. And of course, they always want you to call them, which I find very interesting. The one giving them money types of things. So, but so I filled out the application on March 19th. Now, Friday, I hadn't heard anything, so I called up and I got a hold of a gentleman that kind of said, "Oh, I see your application here. There's something really strange going on here, and I'm not sure exactly what's happening. There seems to be a problem with our Salesforce CRM application, and those types of things." And I was just like, "Okay, so is this something that can be resolved?" And so this person is now in the process of working on it. But I think there's some very important lessons here. And to develop your synthetic thinking skills. And again, if you're new, go to the Effective Executive, the 95method.com/executive playlist. Watch those videos. You'll understand a little bit more, about what it means to be an effective executive. But most of it, or not most of it, but a part of it is developing your synthetic thinking skills. So I take through my executive education program, looking through that customer lens, looking through your thinking lens. But the customer lens can inform a lot about what's actually going on. So the lessons that you can learn from the scenario that I had is kind of what the customer needs are. In my case, I get these forms, there's no direction on them, fill them out type of thing. And there's sections in there as I look through the form, I wasn't sure whether I'm supposed to fill that out, wasn't clear, those types of things. Just leads to more contacts, more time taken, things of that sort. And there's no clarity about kind of what the next step was. And it becomes a burden to me to be the one who has to follow up on all this stuff. Now, I'm the one giving them money, so you would think that there would be some interest in following up with me on, make sure I got the information. But that doesn't resolve the number of contacts back and forth that I had to go through in both scenarios. The second one developing, the first one, there was emails back and forth and phone calls, and for just setting up a simple account and giving money to purchase silver and gold. So that's what I saw. See, I don't care that there are two different companies involved. There's Shift Gold in the first scenario and Entrust. They're two separate organizations. Well, and in the conversations where, I don't really know what goes on with Entrust. I'm just the Shift Gold piece. You'll have to work that out with them. Well, if you're doing this to your customers because they're the experts, meaning your partner or that you're doing business with, this has to be transparent to a customer. I shouldn't be the one that has to figure out all this stuff. It should be very clear about what's going to happen step by step, from what I need to fill out on the form and, what's going to happen with the form, what timelines I should look for, the questions. If you can do it correctly up front, then this is something then that will reduce the number of phone calls. Now, I'm sure there were at least 10 communications back and forth, or interactions, as I call them, between myself and Shift Gold, trying to get this thing resolved, which ultimately it did not. So that's why I moved on to the second company and the second scenario, or companies, I guess I should say. And so I'm with Gold, Silver, and Equity Trust, but they're losing customers here. Shift Gold did lose a customer. If I don't get this resolved pretty soon with Gold, Silver, then and Equity Trust, then I may have to move to a third one, and I'm not sure that it's going to be any better. Now, what they can do is, again, make this transparent, from the directions to the clarity about what's going to happen next, to making it seamless to me as the customer. I almost feel like, it's my honor to be doing business with them. Now, I'm sure they would say something very different, but I'm the one having to do all the follow-up. I'm the one who has had to initiate everything in this process. And having worked in the banking industry, I'm amazed and consulted with many banks. This stuff goes on all the time, and it's, they don't see it. It's very, you got different people doing different things, and it gets lost, and this stuff is maddening, from that standpoint. And the waste is incredible. And then they're like, well, we're not, our profits aren't what they should be. Well, duh. Customers, you're making the customer mad. It costs you a lot of money to be, ineffective in your organization. And, they work on the wrong stuff. They optimize the pieces and not look at the whole of the way that the customer looks at it. And as I've mentioned, the customer doesn't care that there's two different vendors. You can't just say, oh, I'm Shift Gold and Entrust has got that part. No, that's not going to work for any customer. So I thought it was a good lesson, and I wanted to get to it this week. As these things arise, I'm going to be purchasing an HVAC system, so that'll be interesting. But you need to look through that customer lens and realize what's going on end to end. And, just because they're in different computer systems within your own organization, most people can't see what happened with the customer unless you look. And again, part of my executive education program. But it'll give you what your priorities should be in your organization, help set them. And so I thought it was a good lesson. I wanted to share it. And that's what I wanted to cover this week.